to be accurate, exercise is probably one of the most inefficient ways to actually get healthy. When an unhealthy person decides to become healthy, they are unhealthy from a state of the body perspective, and they have good levels of dopamine secretion in their body because they're consuming food that they like. From that, you temporarily move people to, let's say, an unhealthy state. So that is like the very extremely terrible state of transition. You cannot basically burn all the excess calories that you have consumed via food. Okay. If you're not healthy and surviving, that doesn't make any. I mean, it's still a terrible life.
One of the most premium brands to come out of the country, especially in the health tech space over the last couple of years, has been Ultrahuman. I mean, I see people at parties where they wear this Ultrahuman patch, and it is that Apple-like status that it has achieved, which really fascinates me. How do you build a brand like that? How do you build a brand that is truly that premium? How do you build a health tech company? Why build a health tech company in the first place? All these questions I had. How Ultrahuman is functioning in the backend, what they are releasing next. We might have spilled some beans on the show, but this was a really interesting episode with the founder of Ultrahuman. Highly recommended for everybody who's interested in entrepreneurship, but also health. We really discussed, Mohit really dived deeper into the specifics of health. Some really interesting stories about his life as well. I didn't know his life was so fascinating. He has been an entrepreneur before. Zomato acquired his company, and then he was working at Zomato for some time, and then he started up again. That zeal to start up again, even though you might have a very, very good package, takes a lot of guts. And that is what we discussed in today's episode. I hope you like it. Hello, Mohit. Welcome to the Front Seat Show. So excited to have you here. I see like Ultrahuman branding everywhere. The ring, the tracker, the T-shirt. It's very exciting to see the kind of brand you've built. And of course, we'll come to the specifics. But I was looking at your journey that you first started a startup and then you moved to Zomato. Zomato acquired it, correct?
Yeah, that happened in 2017.
Correct. So Zomato acquired the startup and then you start up again. I'm very intrigued to know, firstly, like Zomato was a food tech startup and then again health tech. Kya matlab, did you like order a lot from Zomato that you're like, I have to build a fitness product now and fix everybody? But like, I mean, jokes apart, I want to dive straight into the journey because startup is a very different beast altogether. And then Zomato was no more a startup at that point, right? Like it had systems built in.
Yeah.
And then from systems built in, you moved to again starting up, which is like building the systems ground up, hiring the core team ground up. How was that transition like, and what made you take that transition?
I think a little bit of backstory on that. So Zomato happened in 2017, and Runner, the company that got acquired by Zomato, our company, we started that in 2015, somewhere around early 2015. I think back then the reason why we started was we saw the problem in the delivery space that every merchant in India would need a logistics service which is real time and instant in nature.
Yeah.
And that's what Zomato saw, that can this service be utilized for the food delivery platform? And the transition was extremely seamless initially, right? Because Zomato was a demand generation platform, did not have fulfillment, and we were a fulfillment platform. We did not have demand, unfortunately. So it was A plus B, which was really cool because sort of like the combined exponential effect of synergy pretty much existed, right? It wasn't like there were many overlaps or essentially a lot of like who does what, essentially, right? Back then. Incidentally, delivery was also a new business for Zomato.
Right.
Very new business for Zomato because Zomato back then was doing a, you can say, a third-party fulfilled or restaurant fulfilled delivery business, which was I'll send an order to the restaurant and the restaurant will figure out how to deliver it to the user, right?
Yeah.
A very different experience compared to if you have your own delivery fleet, your own fulfillment, essentially, right? So when we started building the delivery business with Zomato, it almost felt like version 2 of the journey, but almost starting from scratch.
Interesting.
And but of course we had more ammunition. I think few months out we raised a mega round together, so that gave us more ammunition. And then of course back then Swiggy was leading the market, and they were sort of like widening the gap in 2017. But I think to Zomato's credits, I think Zomato's credit essentially Zomato caught up like very fast. Like I haven't seen anything grow as fast as anywhere in the world. Like this is my that was my second hyper growth journey. The first was with Ola, and then was Zomato. I thought that Ola is a crazy place to be at. given competitive synergies, I mean, competitive dynamics with Uber.
Right.
But then this was, you can say,
What
100x.
what worked for Zomato? Like you're saying the hyper growth journey,
Yeah.
and you've not seen anything scale this fast. Something must have worked for them. What was that? What was the thing that worked?
I think many things, but I think ultimately it boiled down to the underdog spirit, that we are the underdog in this space. And to Devinder's credit, essentially in this case, to go from a large company and to believe like that I am the underdog requires you to actually build like a very strong, you can say, very flexible ego, right? To some
Yeah.
extent, right? Say because if you run a large company and your company is already worth $1 billion, you'll never basically approach a problem from ground from day one and basically say that, oh, I'm already running a large company and
Correct.
I'll probably like let this be run by somebody else and not think afresh and from first principles. I think to Dipinder's credit, I think he was extremely entrepreneurial in terms of and very you can say he sort of like took this initiative in terms of saying that let's uh, let's think of this as day zero
Hmm.
and let's build it like we are the underdogs and we were the underdogs
Nice.
as well.
I think
So
that gives you a lot of motivation also to fight through the systems that are already in place by, let's say, traditional companies or traditional
yeah,
systems.
yeah.
Makes
I mean,
sense.
think of it, Rocky Balboa 100 times over, right? I mean, every week that we had a bunch of cities where
Yeah.
we were losing volume, losing market share initially, and then we realized that, oh, this is how. I mean, we have less resources, we have a lower base of users, and when we started, we actually didn't have as much money as well, as even as a combined group. But then it's phenomenal how I have faint memories of some of those weeks uh, where we were doubling every week
Right.
and it almost feels like a distant journey now because like there were so many moving levers back then because like we didn't have the teams set up, we didn't have systems in place,
Yeah.
but then just by the sheer understanding that what is required is great customer experience and everything else is just back end work, right?
Hmm.
So I think that helped us um, quite a fair bit. Yeah,
That's really interesting because after that you started Ultrahuman, right?
yeah,
And Ultrahuman, I want to talk a lot about it, and of course I have very specific question, but I want to know what was this transition like, and what led you to start Ultrahuman when things were going so well, and when you were probably like growing at this crazy pace, right? It's very hard to exit a startup when you're in the middle of, let's say, that
yeah,
blitz scale journey.
yeah, yeah,
So, what made you exit and start like a new company altogether? Because this is a very different place from blitzscaling to fundamentals, like
yeah,
starting a company from ground up.
yeah.
What was that journey like?
So not mincing words, right? So I
Hmm.
think the reason why I started up again was because I always wanted to create something that I own completely, right? But
Hmm.
it's not about equity ownership. It's about
Decision making of.
you can say the vision.
Hmm.
Basically, you should feel extremely strongly about it,
Yeah.
right? And I can say that for 5 years, I felt extremely strongly about the delivery potential and the business that Zomato was building. Like, and we were building initially, and then Zomato was building together.
Yeah.
Essentially, I felt very strongly, and I had 100% of that like being a part of my life. Not even like you can say 90% something like this and 10% something else. I didn't believe in anything else. I used to like madly believe that this is the only company in India that's actually going to win,
Yeah.
given the amount of
I
consumer
think you
love and
need
scale.
that conviction. There's this very interesting article by Sam Altman. I don't know if you've read that. It is that you have to have self belief to the point it becomes delusion if you want to
It was very
like target
delusional.
big.
Like to
Yeah.
some extent, we would evaluate global delivery companies and commerce companies in India. And I'm not saying this in an egoistic when we used to say that look, all of these are going to be replaced by instant delivery companies, and we are going to win,
Yeah.
right? All these guys are archaic, don't stand a chance,
Correct.
and we know how to win from being nothing to being like very large. So no, like there are not many companies that can actually do that.
Correct.
So that was my belief till you can say July 2019, right? And then it switched. I was like, no, I want to do something else in life because there was something brewing in the back end, in the subconscious.
Right.
I was saying that I was into semi-professional and to some extent professional cycling 2010, 11, 12. And just after college,
Hmm.
it is an interesting thing to do because I had a lot of time,
Okay.
right? I was working in a company where I think back then there wasn't a lot of work, which is really cool. and it was very easy to outperform. Basically, just putting it out there.
Which company is this?
uh, you can look it up on LinkedIn. But it's very easy to basically just hit your targets and like
Okay,
I was a software engineer, so essentially I used to
interesting.
like code for 3 days continuously, no
Hmm.
sleep, and then basically say that like my work is done. Like I
Okay.
need like 4 days of my week are like completely empty, and if there's no work, I'll go and chill. So what I used to do
This is
was
which year?
2010.
2010.
Yeah. So what I did was I created sort of like a 3 day work week for myself by putting all the work in first 3 days,
Yeah.
and the rest 4 days essentially just doing whatever I wanted. And what I did was essentially I got into cycling big time,
Right.
and did all the professional formats, etc. And that's what I enjoyed for a long, long time. Um, Till obviously Ola happened, and then when Ola happened, that was like the new love in life, and obviously the problem was really interesting and all of that. Then obviously my own startup happened, and then Zomato happened. So what happened was that I really enjoyed those 3 years, and I
Yeah.
had like a distant memory of the first fling, and I was like,
Okay.
maybe it's time to go back to the first fling.
Interesting.
And what I picked up along the years was another sporting format called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is
Okay.
essentially it's called ground wrestling, if you know about it. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the way it works is, and we'll have to spend a minute talking about it because I
Okay.
feel really passionate about it. Is that
Go for it.
it's a martial art, but it's
Okay.
martial art built for the modern world. The basic way to understand Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that if a strong person and a weak person fights and nobody wins, then who wins? The weak person, right? In this case. So
Hmm.
it's basically designed for survival, and it's designed for self-defense. But obviously, anything that has self-defense can be used to attack as well.
That's such an interesting analogy in any scenario that if a weak and a strong person fights and nobody wins, the weak one wins. It's damn fascinating by this. But so from there to like were you very clear that in Ultrahuman I would want to do like a hardware ring or the continuous glucose tracker or like all these things, or how did it start?
So it started in 2020, early 2020, when to sort of like after Zomato,
Hmm.
I didn't have any ideas. And what I did was I locked myself in a room and said, idea, like, like everyone else.
Okay.
No idea came to me essentially, right?
Right.
Obviously, some ideas came,
Yeah.
very, very shitty ones, some of
Okay.
these.
How do you
Uh,
know if an idea is shitty?
you can only know in retrospect,
Of course,
and
but
sometimes it doesn't turn out to be shitty as well. So
yeah.
the first idea that Vatsal and I used to discuss a lot of ideas, and one of these were like building like a really cool version of Zoom, because Zoom is boring. So
Hmm.
let's build like a really fun version of Zoom. This is pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would have turned out, but most probably would have turned out to be shit, basically.
Okay.
And then there were many such ideas, and what we were
Interesting.
trying to do was to think that, oh, what's working in the world, and let's do that, and
Hmm.
maybe create like a creative version, our take on that part of what
Interesting.
the world needs, right?
Okay.
But at the end of each of these conversations, when we used to have like these 3 4 hour calls, we used to actually talk about like, oh, what's happening in the health and fitness space, how's it going at a training camp. I was training at a training camp, so there's a story around that, and realized that maybe it's the right time to uh, marry that to what I want to do, what we want to do in life,
Hmm.
and maybe there is a way to build a business around it. We
Interesting.
didn't know whether there was a business opportunity or not.
Right.
Um,
Abhilash was telling me that initially you also had these um, guided meditation, like sounds
yeah,
and all of those things,
yes,
workout plans, if I'm not wrong.
yeah.
And then from there to a hardware.
So the story is that so I was training at a martial arts camp.
Hmm.
The name of the camp is Tiger Muay Thai. It's based in Thailand, and essentially there are there on one side there are mountains, on the other side there's a beach, and you just basically run up the mountain every morning and uh,
Wow.
train closer to the beach and then chill at the beach. I did that for like 4 months, 4.5 months, and we used to talk about like what's going to happen in health in the future, right? Human health is a complex topic. Everybody has
Correct.
an opinion on it. So what's going to happen? And we had two fundamental, you can say, thought pointers around it. The first one was that people want to learn from the best people in the world, in terms of what their protocols are. And second is people want to know more about their own body. So
Hmm.
protocols are essentially by coaches, and knowing more about your own body is data.
Correct.
Get more data, you can make informed decisions. So
Correct.
the first part is what we built first, which is basically how do people get access to,
Data.
no, to basically what the best people in the world are doing.
Okay,
So
interesting.
people in the world meditate, best people in the world essentially do strength training, and they have their own complex protocol. Can we bring all of that to the platform,
Interesting.
right? So that's what we did for almost a year, and we also started building the layers of data on top of it to build the next side of, you can say, the platform.
Okay.
What we realized was that the data bit is really interesting because it gives you infinite customizability,
Okay.
because you can learn from the best person in the world in terms of their protocol, but can you actually implement it? The answer is
Interesting.
going to
Because
be very
for
hard.
every person like that, it'll be different, right? Like what works for me
Yeah.
will not work for you.
It's because our, I mean, biologically we are different, but also
Correct.
our lifestyle is very different.
Correct.
If I have to sleep at 2 a.m. every day, um, if you ask me to sleep at 11 p.m., that might be an answer, but might not be a sustainable answer, because my lifestyle is built around sleeping at 2 a.m.
Correct.
So how do I, with those constraints, still end up being a healthy person? So that was the core hypothesis around data. And we started testing out different variables, data that could be derived. Two biomarkers stood out for us. One was heart rate variability, and second was blood glucose.
Right. So
And
biomarker is what you're wearing. Can we?
this is the blood
That's the
glucose
biomarker.
biomarker.
Interesting.
Um, and glucose was really
What
interesting.
all is it tracking? Like very, very simply, layman language put, if I put it here, what all is it tracking?
So blood glucose, I mean, glucose is the primary biomarker that it tracks.
Interesting.
Glucose is an interesting biomarker because it's used by every cell of your body, right? And the way glucose gets used inside the body, in a very, very simple layman terms, tells a lot about your health, right? Not just in diabetic people, but also in everybody else, essentially, right? Because it's a, like, if you can look at an engine of a car and say that, oh, this is how the engine uses fuel, even before the engine has become faulty, you can do a lot of deep engine diagnosis. Similar concept here as well, right? So you can look at the zone of your glucose and tell that, oh, this is how your body is able to process glucose, means that this is the state of your insulin resistance to some extent. And insulin is an interesting hormone, as we know, because insulin, the lack of insulin creates, basically is reflected into autoimmune disorders.
Correct.
The excess of insulin is sort of like reflected in metabolic disorders, etc. Right? So that was the core hypothesis. What we found interesting about glucose was that it can give you feedback on your food side of your lifestyle. Everything
Interesting.
else, like if you have an activity tracker that measures your steps, calories, etc., is telling you to be more active or to optimize your activity. But then a large part of our health is also food,
Correct.
right? What we eat determines a lot of our outcome, right? To be accurate, exercise is probably one of the most inefficient ways to actually get healthy, because of the fact that, like, you cannot outrun a bad diet. You cannot basically burn all the excess calories that you have consumed via food, right? Somebody was telling me that to burn half an Oreo cookie, you have to run 32 flights of stairs, right?
Wow.
Um, so it, I mean, if you look at if you apply the principles of leverage there, uh, both of these have to go hand in
Food
hand.
becomes a big part of it, and you can track that through glucose. And what about the ring, right? Like you're wearing the ring
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Now, after that, what made you then introduce another vertical, right?
yeah.
What is it doing differently than, let's say, what the bio tracker was doing?
So if you look at glucose, right, and let's say you consume something and there's a glucose response. If that food item has like higher amounts of sugar in it, so you'll see a spike in your food, right?
Correct.
Now this spike is going to be different for you and me. Why? Because biologically we are different. We have different muscle mass. We have different microbiome. We have different stress levels. We have different sleep routines. We have different hydration levels. All of these factors affect your glucose response
Interesting.
as much as up to 40 to 50%, right? This is what we have seen in our own internal data as well. So does that really mean that only food is the culprit? Or basically just by changing your food, you will be able to change your lifestyle? So
Yeah.
that was an evolution in our hypothesis that if you if you ask somebody to get healthy and you say that, oh, this is what you should be eating, and then this is what you should not be eating, obviously the not to be eaten stuff turns out to be the more, you can say, lucrative stuff usually, right?
Correct.
And then it becomes like a downward spiral. Why does it become like a downward spiral? Because when an unhealthy person decides to become healthy, they are unhealthy from a state of the body perspective, and they have good levels of dopamine secretion in their body because they're consuming food that they like. They're
Correct.
consuming the type of foods that they like. From that, you temporarily move people to, let's say, an unhealthy state because body takes time to change, and but dopamine deficient. So that is like the very like extremely terrible state of transition, right? So when you start working out and start eating healthy, you're like suddenly like basically you're extremely sad in your life because your body hasn't changed, and all the
Yeah.
dopamine in your life is gone, right?
But isn't gym, like, doesn't gym also induce dopamine in you?
It's a good question because certain type of workouts do. And I mean, dopamine is essentially like a, all these hormones work together really well. Dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, all of these. And the core concept is that the more one produces, the more resistant you could be of that. For example, if you have more elements in your
Correct.
lifestyle that give you
This
dopamine,
happens with drugs, right? Like once you increase that threshold,
yeah,
now other things which earlier used to were inducing these
yeah,
hormones, now they're not anymore because your
yeah.
threshold has become really high.
So more than dopamine, you can say epinephrine,
Hmm.
that gets released and makes you feel really good.
Okay.
And dopamine, of course, you get from all auditory, visual, senses, sugars that you consume, right? Everything
Interesting.
that evolution has sort of like designed you for, that this is good for you. And to be honest, for survival, these things are good. Like easy rewards are good.
Correct.
um, to coming back to your point, exercise can actually help you put on the path where you actually get faster dopamine, right? This is what exercise were actually for, physical activity. Like ancient humans didn't exercise per se, right? They were hunting in many cases, or they were
Correct.
doing agriculture, right? And they used to put in effort to extract food which used to give them dopamine. So we're still
Hmm.
chasing dopamine as a human being, no matter what self-control you
Slightly
practice,
different way.
in a slightly different way. But then the core biology, right? We have not evolved over the last 20 years, right?
Hmm.
Biologically as much. If you design a system and say that, oh, everyone should exercise and eat healthy, now that's a very, 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 very restrictive system. That's not going to happen for a lot of people.
Correct.
Reason for that is it's not just our modern lifestyle, but that's
Okay.
not how we have designed. Like biologically, we're not designed like that. We are designed to chase rewards, right?
Correct.
Designed to chase rewards. Nobody can change that, the core biological aspect. Like you cannot say that, oh, in atmosphere you have oxygen, but let's replace it with a new molecule. That's not going to happen, essentially,
Correct.
right? Similarly, we are not changing rewards here. We're just sort of what we are doing is essentially we are making minimal changes in terms of how you seek rewards. And that's why the ring came into the picture, because it became imperative for us, important for us to understand why your glucose varies beyond foods,
Hmm.
beyond the food response. Why does the glucose vary?
So
If
what
you
all is
don't,
it tracking right now?
so the ring tracks sleep, recovery, activity, all those factors that affect your glucose response.
And a very, very blunt question, but I wear an Apple Watch, right?
Yeah,
So it also tracks sleep, it also has a heart rate monitor.
yeah.
How is it different from, let's say, an Apple Watch?
Sure. So this tracks your sleep recovery activity in context of your metabolism. So metabolism, it's a totally
Is it
different.
connected to the tracker?
It's
It's the
sort of
same
like
app,
streamed to
right?
the same app, Ultrahuman, and that's where we integrate your data and give you insights, essentially,
Got
right?
it.
Now, what's interesting is that, so when you look at human physiology, you can interpret the data in many ways. You can interpret in terms of saying that for you, this data is something that needs to be optimized for performance. Then the watch will actually give you insights around that you should move more, you should finish your 10,000 steps, this is your VO2 max range, etc., right? The other range is basically in terms of longevity, which there are not too many companies, but it's an emerging trend.
Yeah.
What we optimize for is metabolism. So it's a totally different algorithm, right? So what we expect people to do, for example, is to have movement density throughout the day. Instead of just, so for example, if you wake up and do 10,000 steps and you're sedentary throughout the day, that doesn't make the cut. But if you're active, let's say 2,000 steps in the morning, 3,000 in the afternoon, and maybe you're still very, very active throughout the day, that is actually much more metabolism friendly.
Is the overall mission of the company to increase the longevity of human life? Is that the mission that drives you, or is there something else?
So we see lifespan and health span in one, essentially, right? Because we believe that the definition of life cannot be just basically the fact that you're merely surviving.
Okay.
If you're not healthy and surviving, that doesn't
Hmm.
make any. I mean, it's still a terrible life, essentially,
Correct.
right? So it's in effect it's health span, to be honest, that we are
Interesting.
optimizing for. And a lot of these chronic disorders actually, like diabetes, pre-diabetes, collection of metabolic disorders, compound in a massive way as you age, right?
Yeah.
And it starts compounding further when somebody turns 40, Um, and basically then additional factors get added when you turn 50, because then you have musculoskeletal damage to your body. Moving is harder, right?
Correct.
There's a fall risk. You can't move as fast. You can't do intensive cardio activity. So
Right.
this age from 30 to 50 really determines, actually specifically 35 to 45, really determines how the next 30 years of your life are going to be. Because your corrective measures that you're going to take from 45 till 75 or 85 are very, very minimal. Like you'll always be playing that catch-up game, which is something went wrong, let me fix it. Something went wrong, let me fix it. 35 to 45, most things aren't wrong, and you can prepare. There's a
Interesting.
concept in exercise called prehab, which is a really interesting concept. So
Prehab.
prehab.
What does prehab mean?
So prehab means that you actually prepare for an injury even before it has happened. So what are the common injuries in a sport, for example, right? You say that, oh, if I play tennis, most probably I'll have a ligament injury somewhere in my career if I'm going to play for long,
Right.
right? And most probably it'll be the MCL. So how do you prepare your MCL so that you actually avoid the injury for
And
a
what do
long
you
time?
actually do to prepare for this?
So there are certain set of, you can say, so when you're looking at ligaments, you work on supporting muscles. So because you can't really train the ligaments, you train the supporting muscles. And these are custom exercises targeted on those muscle groups essentially.
Wow.
So you predict that these are the 5 injuries that are very common. Out of these, the top three, 85% are these, 90% are these. Just train for those three, you will most probably never be injured. It's the same concept here as well. So nobody's asking you to change your lifestyle, but if you're walking after your meals, adding more proteins to your diet, usually more proteins and fibers to your diet,
Right.
um, most probably you will never have a scenario of diabetes ever in your life.
Interesting. When we talk about Ultrahuman in the startup context, most people run away from hardware startups. Like it's a nightmare. The
Yeah,
supply chain and even just getting VCs to believe in you if you are building something in hardware is just really, really tough.
yeah.
Um, I want to know why hardware, right? If everybody is moving away from hardware, what pushed you to do hardware? Why not only stick to software?
One of the reasons why we're doing hardware is because we wanted more control over the answer,
Okay.
right? And if we restrict ourselves to software and work on third-party wearable data, you can't go beyond a certain level of insights, right? So
Right.
that is the answer from a perspective of why this is required.
Why this is required?
Uh, the second answer is that if this was my first startup, would I have done hardware? The answer most probably would have been no in this case, because I think hardware does require a different level of, you can say, self-belief to some extent. It is
Interesting.
harder to a large extent because the speed of iteration is lower, right?
Correct.
I mean, you can't change things overnight. You can't
Yeah.
change things even within weeks sometimes, right?
Correct.
So I think
How much
it's
time did it take you to make the ring?
this was 1.5 years in development.
And this
Um,
is made in India?
this is like completely designed, assembled, manufactured in India, and we
Wow.
source components from outside, like most places, like many places in the world. But then essentially, this is completely owned.
And where is the manufacturing facility? Like, how did you set that up? What was the process like?
So obviously, the first manufacturing facility was inside the office, which is micro manufacturing facility,
Right.
because we wanted more control in the process. And then the next one was essentially near to the office, which is still near to the office essentially.
It's in Bangalore.
It's in Bangalore. Yes,
So these rings are being manufactured in Bangalore.
absolutely.
That's really fascinating. And because I'm sure hiring for people who can make these products is also very tricky.
Yeah.
What was that process like? Because we talk about today, I saw some company putting a banner for hiring engineers. Hiring engineers and this talent is very different from hiring, let's say, people who can actually make this because you require
Yeah.
highly specialized, let's say, actual engineers and not like
Yeah.
what we call ourselves, which is engineers but not doing an engineering job.
Yeah.
How did that hiring process look like? How do you actually start building a product?
So we were lucky because we actually acquired a company in the hardware space
Oh, nice.
called so the name of the company is Lazy Co. They were
Okay.
building products for lazy people, and which is everyone. And the name of the product was Aina, AINA. It
Okay.
was a smart ring, in fact, which essentially could help you control devices around yourself. So you could basically run the coffee machine, turn on lights, etc., etc.
Interesting.
So very, very
It's like
minimal
a touch-enabled ring?
touch enabled. You could do motions like you can swipe on the side, right?
Wow.
You can do a piezo. You can press the ring and something will happen.
And are there motion controls on this ring as well?
Yes, they are. So I mean, not the piezo one, but then there are gestures that we are building on top of this. So they were building payment stack on
Interesting.
top of this. You could just
So,
wave your hand and it'll pay all of that,
oh,
right? So basically, the idea was that what do lazy people require in life, right? They don't carry wallets, they don't want to carry their phones also,
Yeah.
right? So all of that. So it's becoming more and more minimal in terms of the form factor. And
Very interesting.
when we spoke to them, there was connect in terms of like we are also designing products for lazy people because
Yeah.
lazy means efficiency as well. It doesn't just mean low motivation. It also means efficiency.
Correct.
And how do we build this for the number one use case that lazy people need, which is health, right? And not just controlling devices.
That makes a lot of sense. And now that you're talking about your devices, your pricing like really excites me, and at the same time, I question something very fundamental, right? Um, is health inherently expensive, or are you building a premium company, right? So one part is कि health है ही expensive and you can't get away with that, or it's a conscious decision that no matter how expensive or cheap it is, irrelevant, you are building a premium company because your communication is very premium. Like anything that you do, right? I was just talking to Abhilash as well that the fact that you're wearing a t-shirt, the color palettes, the use of monotone, using the colors carefully, using empty space. These are all design elements that reflect premiumness,
Yeah.
and you're very carefully curated. That even the ring, the design is amazing, and I feel you've always paid attention to that design. So was it a conscious choice to build a premium company, or health है ही महंगा?
If you to answer that, let's divide the world into two parts.
Okay.
People who can pay for health and people who can't pay for health.
Okay.
All right. People who can't pay for health, let's assume that they have access to nothing today, and they can't get outcomes to health essentially. Let's assume that for a moment, right? People who can pay for health, are they getting outcomes? You can't buy your health.
Correct.
To some extent, right?
You can't.
It should be as easy as buying your health. Eventually, right? I know that there's this around that no, health is more about like basically it should not be made available to everyone. Why? I mean there are a lot of companies that say that you should be worthy enough to be healthy. Right? I
Really?
don't believe in that. I mean some metal-headed guys basically
Interesting. Because I'm hearing it for the first time because most healthy people I know are actually not wealthy. It's in like of course wealth. If you're wealthy, you should be healthy as well. But like most like capitalistically rich people I know are the most unhealthy people I know of.
if you look at healthy, wealthy, happy, people have somehow understood over the last few years how wealth works to some extent.
Yeah.
And people are still understanding, right? How micro wealth works, how macro wealth works, etc. Right? There's a lot of work done there. Obviously, happiness is a very abstract concept, but from a health perspective, it's not like the wealthiest. To your point, wealthiest people have it easy,
Yeah.
right? It's not that it becomes much more efficient for them, right? And this is a fundamental problem. Like, why can't money buy this? Which basically means that this is a massive supply problem. If even money can't buy this, means that the answer does not exist today.
Okay. Correct.
Right? If money would have bought this and the answer existed, people would have ascribed a value to it.
Makes sense.
Even if you say pay $1 million and become healthy, there are many people in the world I know, you know, who are going to buy their health for $1 million.
Right. So are you saying because there's no value attached to health, that means we don't know whether this is expensive or cheap? Is that what you're saying?
There is no clear, definite answer today, which basically says that yes, you will be 100% healthy if you pay X amount of value.
But from like an objective standpoint, these products are still expensive, right? Now, I'm not comparing it to, let's say, how expensive health is, but how expensive like a general lifestyle is. Buying this ring is not for the masses. So I want to know if that's a conscious decision that right now we want to build a premium company, like how Apple does it very consciously, or is it that okay, this product can't be built for cheap?
So the company view on this is that we want control over building the company for the next 45 to 50 years, given the fact that all the answers that are going to get discovered are going to many answers are going to get discovered over the next 45 to 50 years because the era of health and personalized health is coming. So we want to be there when this gets created.
Correct.
How do you survive for 50 years? You actually have enough amount of sustainability margin in your business to actually recreate new products and to actually create new versions of the new products, because this patch and this ring is not the end game for the company as well, right? If this was
what's
the end
coming next?
there's a lot in the pipeline, but I think this is the next one actually, to be honest.
Give us like a hint of like what's the third product that's coming up?
I think the way to imagine that is something that you don't need to do additionally. So like for example, this is a natural wearable, right? it's on your finger, and people have been wearing rings for the last
Right.
5,000 years essentially, right? It's not additionally something that you need to do. Like if you buy an exercise bike, you have to exercise on the bike to derive value. Like you can just put this on your finger, and even if you don't do anything, you still derive value to some extent,
Okay.
right? So that's the core principle of designing things.
It should already be in your lifestyle. We'll just replace it with a different thing.
Yeah, with a different
So
type of
are glasses, watches, are these the kind of products that you have in the pipeline?
some of these, maybe all of these, but some of these.
Maybe all of these.
Yeah.
Like what's the absolute next? So give us like a riddle hint, like something that we can probably like the smart ones can decode.
I think the short term to mid term would look like more data from the same variables.
Interesting.
So the most, I mean, there's a really cool one which I want to talk about is, let's say, the lactate levels, for example, in your body. So this is glucose, but eventually this will be able to do your lactate levels as well. So lactate
Very cool.
is very interesting because a top performing athlete and an unfit person might actually have the same lactate levels. Why? Because this person is under recovered because of their lactate levels, and this person obviously, I mean, because of their activity levels, because of their state of health, this unfit person will also have very high basal lactate, and the athlete will also have very high basal lactate because they are pushing themselves, right? Now, for these two people, the protocol is similar. For these two people, is going to be similar because this person needs a lot of zone 2 activity in their life. The other person also needs a lot of zone 2 activity.
Correct. Zone
So-
2 activities?
So essentially, less than 60% of your VO2 max. That's what zone 2 is defined as. The other layer definition could be less than 120 in terms of your heart rate. All the activities done
Interesting.
within that. Between, you can say, 100 to 120, somewhere in that range, right? I know it's technically inaccurate, but then this is the easiest way to understand this.
It's damn interesting. Like now that we're talking about pricing, right? Like we were just browsing through your website and you have this very fascinating roadmap on your website, which is X early bird, this early bird, and there are like multiple check. Usually, I've seen like early bird pricing and normal pricing. You have like checkpoints. Two questions there, right, which came to my mind that it makes sense that you're trying to generate hype by doing deep discounting, probably may or may not hit the profit margin. Of course, that I don't know. But what I'm trying to understand is even after 2,500 pieces, shouldn't the economies of scale kick in? So is it purely to generate hype, or is the product not getting cheaper as the quantities are increasing, which it technically should?
Product does get cheaper.
Yeah.
I think definitely the milestones look like 10,000, 100, 50,000, 100,000, not like 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, because again, it's biosensor
So
hardware,
this is
etc.
these checkpoints are purely for hype.
These checkpoints are purely basically to give value to like first users, essentially, people who believe first in the product, because these are the people who actually think of it like this, right? So when the first set of personal computers were distributed in 1980s, all of these folks were called lunatics, right?
Correct.
Saying that, oh, why do you need a computer? You can just go to a lab and do your computing work and come back, because all the work done was computing work. There was no entertainment on computers, right?
Correct.
There was like people who were using computers were scientists, mathematicians, some of these were architects, etc., right? And people would say that, oh, but then why is it an appliance? Why does everyone need it? Now it is an appliance. Like obviously we need the computers in our lives to do everything and anything at all. I think we believe that this is going to happen to biosensors in the future, given the fact that tracking health will truly personalize health for everyone. You will not go by marketing narratives. I know that you've gotten Shashank from Whole Truth here, right?
Yeah.
So he's trying to do something really interesting, which is
Correct.
to cut through all the marketing narratives and say that this is the whole truth. This is what's there.
You're just
inside.
having his bars.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we are trying to do a similar thing via data and for many other things in your lifestyle as well. He's trying to solve a very interesting problem in food,
Right.
and we are basically trying to understand like how do your lifestyle factors actually affect you purely from a data perspective, and then you can decide for yourself. You can say that, oh, was this bar good for me, or let's say my conventional wisdom.
You make not just this food, but like every food category and every activity that we do very transparent by data.
Even environmental factors. So I was telling somebody yesterday that my glucose variability, which is the marker of oxidative stress in the body, goes up in a significant way when I actually spend time in Delhi. Uh, Similar food, because I totally control my food environment.
Yeah.
Same food. And I've factored for, let's say, flight travel, like I track it after 5 days, all those factors, same level of dehydration, hydration, Glucose variability just
Delhi
depends
is
on that.
just
It's just another level of air pollution. So
correct.
does air pollution not affect your health?
Hmm.
If we have not done longitudinal studies individually on people, we don't know, right?
Right.
And the problem is that what do we consume the most? Air in most cases,
Correct.
right? And if the fundamental base is not correct, then you are going to have problems in your health, whatever you do, right? The,
Makes sense.
the lowest hanging fruit is disrupted.
I was so I go to Cult and I saw that they also released a sensor.
Yeah.
And what this the first thought I had in mind is okay, so now Ultraman has a competition, and and I was then I did my research that these sensors have existed for
Yeah.
quite some time. How are you planning to, or how rather you have differentiated yourself till now, and how are you planning to differentiate yourself in the future?
So generally, what we have seen is that people who associate with us are more of the creative mindset. They create usually
Okay,
because we are very fast with our iteration routines. So, for example, recently we've launched an upgrade which basically helps you measure your recovery with the same sensor. So
interesting.
it looks at your body temperature and your temperature patterns essentially.
So
Right.
speed becomes like a very important part of like
Speed is a
brand
big part
differentiation.
because so we are not just building this like a business, but we are building this with people who are using the product.
Correct.
And
And
I
how many
think
people are like in the Ultrahuman ecosystem right now?
somewhere around 20,000 people who are using the product. And
These are just that or this and that combined.
this will be just that. And
Hmm.
then there are approximately 3,000 odd people who have purchased the ring. So that's where we are.
Interesting.
It's very early days for the ring. We've just introduced it to our community first, in fact. And I think there's a Kickstarter campaign coming up for the rest of the world very, very
Yeah.
soon.
It's very exciting because one of the key differentiators for you as an outsider is the brand. Wherever I go, like Ultrahuman sensor is right now like, oh, must be like doing really well. It's really expensive. So it's also become a sign of status somewhere, especially in circles. And that's pretty exciting because when it becomes that sign of status, you're building a very strong brand because the moment I slap that logo anywhere, even a t-shirt for that matter, this t-shirt becomes extremely valuable. It might not have intrinsic value, but it has extrinsic value because it has a logo on it.
Yeah.
What has been this brand building journey like? Is this something that you are a veteran at because before this you were building a very different kind of a company? So how did you end up cracking the brand Ultrahuman?
So the first few thoughts around brand building were to look at the stories uh, of companies that ended up building a brand, right? And there's a lot of narrative out there which says that, oh, if you follow a consistent palette of color, then your brand is visible everywhere.
Yeah,
If you follow this type of typography, your brand is visible. I think those are things to do, but I think for a long time we were trying to find out what is the common element, like apart from these things. These are obviously things to be done, but then what is the core element? And one thing that we discovered very, very clearly was that in all of these companies, whichever company you think is a brand, whether it's Tesla or basically your Apples of the world, essentially, right? The people who are creating the product are extremely passionate about the product,
right.
right? And who are the first set of people who create the product? The people who are in the company, right? So there is this interesting statistic. I think a friend of mine was telling me that how many creators do actually use their product? Actually do use their product, right? And we
Interesting.
wanted to optimize first for that metric.
Hence hence Mo just came in wearing all the products.
Yeah, it's important, right? Because the thing is, if
No,
it
it
is not
makes sense.
adding value to your life, then how can you actually make it, like, how would it add value to like millions and millions of other people? And
Correct.
if it adds value to your life, then you can tell the story the right way. Because the most successful story is your own story, if it
Correct.
adds value for you, because you have the most conviction on that story,
Correct.
not somebody else's story that 38% of users got 50% better results. That nobody gives a shit. What people care about is how did it change your life. It's a personal
Correct.
story. So we
No, that
started
makes a
there.
lot of sense. And in this company building journey, what really excites me when I talk to entrepreneurs, and even like when I have built, so this is like my second company. First one just didn't work out for a gazillion reasons. And one thing that really excited me is I always had a vision of that, yeah, this will work for sure. Like you have these preconceived notions that you have to unlearn and then relearn. What were some things that you thought would absolutely work for Ultrahuman, but they just failed and never worked at all?
So saying this in a blunt way, I think the recorded classes coaching model didn't work. Why did it not work? Because there is external data which says that basically, yes, all these companies sort of like cap out around 100, $200 million in value, but intrinsically also it's very hard for people to follow somebody else's protocol because they need a lot of flexibility, and data can give them that flexibility. So that was one truth in your face saying that doesn't work.
And throughout, like, from your, early startup days to Zomato to now Ultrahuman, if you had to just encapsulate three learnings as an entrepreneur, yeah, ये तीन चीजें सीखी and probably the hard way I learned these things, what would those three things be?
I think one is build the product for yourself first. If you don't use your product and you don't find interest in your own product and you don't sort of like drool over your own product, essentially like wake up every morning and see that, oh, this is amazing, this is a new feature, I'm loving this, then you're not going to have sustained passion over time.
Right.
It's a lot of us, everybody essentially says that, oh, we are very passionate about our company, but passion is also like a sinusoidal wave, right, over time. So what helps you maintain that is if you've created something amazing and for yourself, not for somebody else. Yes, there is all that thing
You
that,
have to be in love with your own product first.
yeah. I mean, you can create it for the other user, and truly intrinsically humans don't care about what the other person feels. Like they do care to some extent because we are people of community, etc. But from a survival instinct perspective, we first do things that are good for ourselves.
Right.
We also do community because we like to do community for ourselves, right? So it's human biology, right? It's not behavioral science, human biology essentially in this.
So first is build the product first for yourself and be in absolute love with it.
Yeah, that I think that is a huge change from, let's say, the previous startup and the current one. Previous startup, we were doing market study, and I was totally in love with that as well, which is basically like do market study, understand why do these stores require logistics and what form of logistics do they require, and then build it for them. But then you don't get the product answer instinctively, right? Because you have never run a store in your life, right? Or like a physical store,
You
right?
have to rely on a lot of other stories and not your story.
Absolutely. And do you feel like when you're at a beach thinking about life, do you feel passionately about somebody's food getting delivered? And I'm not saying that the model is bad. I'm just saying that what do you think more about? Or do you think about basically, so I today think about human biology and my own biology in some ways, and how does my system actually work compared to, and I don't really think about like, oh, for 10,000 users, this is how it worked. So I'm just saying that this is how the mental shift has happened for myself. It's not an advice, it's just like something that I feel is helping us, or helping me at least, think clearly.
What about like 2 and 3?
2 and 3, I think the second one would be to build less, don't build too many features.
Interesting.
And I think the principle that to build one, kill one, still makes a lot of sense. It's not in a literal way, but I think in a very, very...
Be focused in your approach.
Yeah, it takes a lot. So this is an advice for a second-time entrepreneur. Second-time entrepreneur also has this celebrity pressure, right, to some extent. Like you're a celebrity kid. I mean, I'm not saying that the entrepreneurs are celebrities.
Now you don't need to be humble. Like,
yeah,
it is. I mean, for sure, right? Because you've proven something once. Now it becomes even harder to fail.
Yeah, you know everything, so this should definitely work. Doesn't work like that. So you don't know anything, and nothing works. So you have to think first principles and say that basically I'll do less things.
Do you have that fear that, yeah, what if I get wrong? It'll really hurt the reputation that I've built.
That was going to be my third point, but transitioning over to the third point, make personal wealth as fast as possible, right? The most successful entrepreneurs in the world are rich people. The story that rags to riches is a BS story, right? That, oh, Mark Zuckerberg didn't have anything. All that. There are only like 100 such people in the world. There are millions and thousands and millions of people who actually had their ground covered already, and then they made it big because they were mentally at peace in terms of like, what if this goes wrong? Because this entrepreneurship game is actually about risk-taking capability.
Correct.
And if you fail, then no repercussions. Like, we are not living in that age where if you don't pay back your debt and you will be caged, etc. Right? So this is why more companies are getting created. And if you don't realize it truly, the best way to realize it is that you don't care about like earning money for at least for the next 2 3 years, because you have enough in the bank.
Have backups ready before you take that big bet.
Yes, I think in an emotional way, people can say that no, go all in. That's a bullshit advice, to be honest. That
Sounds good in a motivational speech, but
yeah.
like doesn't sound good in a utilitarian perspective.
Yeah, it's always that David versus Goliath view versus underdog view, etc. Right? That I mean, you should use that as a way to say that, oh, I'm a small business and I'll build a big one, right?
Right.
But when it comes to personal finances, the thing is, and this is a problem. This is a systemic problem, right? That failure is not yet as appreciated as in US versus in India, right? We don't have repercussions. Like
Right.
companies fail and nothing happens. But then like basically entrepreneurs making enough wealth whenever they can, save enough money so that they can take bolder bets, I think is a huge unlock.
Makes a lot of sense. You know, we've come almost to the end, and we do this like fun bit towards the end where,
Let's do it.
like we get really candid. I'm gonna say name of like 5 or 6 companies, and you have to, in one line, candid thoughts about them. So this is like rapid fire, right?
Sure.
It has to come immediately, otherwise, like we move to the next company, right? So immediate thoughts, one liner about companies that we have.
Time to burn some bridges. Let's do it.
Cool. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Hell the family.
Uh, good people.
You started with like such a diplomatic answer. Like, okay, but like we need like more meat in the answers. Okay, cred.
Cool, metallic, exciting black brand.
Okay, cult fit.
Too distracted.
Too distracted. Byju's.
Too scammy.
Interesting. Swiggy.
Very precise, very methodical.
Zepto.
Uh, very entrepreneurial, and you can say very yeah, that's what I would say.
Do you believe in the 10-minute delivery idea as a
I
whole?
believe in the founder.
You believe in the founder.
Yeah.
Interesting. Zomato.
Survivor.
Ultrahuman.
Longevity.
Lovely. So it's an amazing show. So we do this ritual towards the end. Now I've asked you like a gazillion questions. So at the end, you ask me one question that probably you want to ask or anything that you want to know.
What I want to know. What I want to know is what is your favorite fitness routine?
What is my favorite fitness routine?
Yeah.
I do a lot of strength training now because I've always been really thin. Like I'm still very thin, but now I'm more on the fit thin side. But I love running. I'm running a half marathon in October, then again in January. Just did a 10K run, so I love running. I think no routine, but I just love to run it. It makes me the happiest, and it has. I feel like just that part of me has got me out of like really tough situations. So if I were to choose like one thing for the rest of my life, it would be either running or like cycling would be the second one. So
Very
love doing these activities.
Really cool. Awesome.
Super. Thank you so much, Mohit. This was great. Thanks for taking out the time to do this. I'm sure the audience they learned a lot from this, and the journey is really fascinating. I'm just very excited to see what you bring on to next. Hopefully like cool glasses and watches which you have like kind of promised on the show. So I'm gonna be waiting for those.
Yeah. Let's do it. Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you.